Time to get our first discussion on the road for you, everyone. We turn now to the conversation around the compressed natural gas initiative that appears to be pivotal to the overall strategy of government to drive developments and bring some kind of ease to motoring and driving developments from an economic standpoint in Nigeria right now. However, that in itself has hit a few bumps already. Yesterday, concerns were rife about whether or not we should push further with this otherwise laudable CNG initiative. And this is coming from what we now know as a ban by the Malaysian authorities on CNG-powered vehicles. On account of these developments, Nigerians, whether regular everyday citizens or even those who are referred to as critical stakeholders, are now saying that we probably need to step on our brakes for a second and take another look at whether or not we need to move any forward with this program. Well, we're joined by an expert this morning who will help us provide very critical insights and perspectives on what exactly we're dealing with and what best methods for addressing these issues should be. Joining us live via Zoom from Lagos State is energy expert, Dr. Wisdom Patrick Enag. Thank you so very much for breaking through your schedule this Friday morning to join us here on the program.
Thank you very much and good morning. Hello.
All right, so I'm going to ask you this first. What exactly are we dealing with? Let's start from the Malaysian standpoint. What do we need to understand very clearly about what has happened in Malaysia and how that has become a source of concern for us back in Nigeria?
All right, thank you very much. I think one thing we need to know about the issue about CNG generally is that the safety aspects of CNG is down to the utilization and the nature it is utilized. What I mean by that is, compared to PMS, CNG is a lot less forgiving when things go wrong, but the tendency for things to go wrong when things are done properly is quite less. That's the way I put it. The reason I say so is this. Think about what the whole concept of CNG and with regards to how it relates to when things go wrong and how things go wrong. Number one, when we have, let's say, for example, you have a CNG, what are the rules? You must put a CNG, cylinder in a place where there's really no extreme heat, because that's not good for it. And that's the same reason why a CNG cannot travel a long distance, very long distance, cross-country compared to an LNG, which is why if you want to ship long distances, you'd have to use an LNG. The CNG would typically the entropy within the system would have been higher, and then there could be an outburst in the system. Now, but when it comes to the safety perspectives, the CNG actually presents a much safer fuel. There's a narrow range of flammability compared to PMS, and also the auto-ignition temperature, the temperature at which CNG would ignite itself is much higher than petrol or diesel. But then, why do accidents still happen if that is true? It happens because people don't use it properly. One of the biggest risks of CNG is explosion. And one of the biggest factors that contribute to explosion is where you use substandard cylinders or substandard kits. That's one of the biggest problems. So as long as people use it properly, within the right ambience condition, for example, if you're driving in the boot of your car, make sure there's no heat source there. And make sure every now and then you allow time for, when you finish your journey, and you're going to be in direct sun, make sure you open it up so that there's kind of some airflow around it and it cools down, doesn't begin to have a very high entropy and the higher chances of explosion.
Have a bit of controversy around this right now. Of course, you look at what had happened in Benin City, Edo State, just a few weeks ago, the explosion. Of course, you have tried to explain that we need to understand the dynamics around it, how to use it, how to deploy it, and how that it is essentially different because CNG-powered vehicles or machines can travel long distances like cross-country trips. and what have you.
Correct.
But for Nigerians who are watching this morning, they probably are very eager to want to understand what is largely the reason Malaysia is announcing this ban, so that we can use that as a basis to set the record straight for people back home in Nigeria.
I mean, well, so I think one of the biggest reasons has been how to standardize it in such a way that the safety aspects that and the consequences of the risk occurrence is quite minimized. Because when you're looking at risk management, you're looking at reducing the probability of occurrence or the consequences of occurrence, right? And what they've done is, yes, there are inherent risks associated with the misuse. What I'll give you a very good analogy. It's like saying you're going on an aircraft and someone says to you, an aircraft is the safest form of transport because it has the least accident by statistics. And then you turn around and say, well, but if there is any form of an accident with an aircraft, then the chances of survival is zero. What do we have there? We have low probability of occurrence, high consequence of occurrence. Now, that's the same thing that the Malaysian government are looking at. There's a high consequence when things happen, but it doesn't really happen. And what is it down to? It's down to standardization. It's down to the fact that how do you ensure that you can take ownership of the technology? The biggest problem is insofar as we have to inherit this technology from foreign partners, and there is no way to recertify. I'll give you context. When last did any of us pick our LPG cylinders, go and check that the LPG cylinders are healthy and they still have enough wall thickness for the maximum allowable working pressure that the cylinder should see? That's the first thing we need to think about. So it's more about our operations and maintenance culture. CNG really needs a very thorough operations and maintenance culture. Otherwise, things are going to go wrong. So if we don't do that, and the next question someone is going to ask is, where can I get my cylinder recertified? So there's a lot of questions. And where a country doesn't have that level of infrastructure to allow the average person to keep to the safety tenets of using a particular technology, then the chances are they might as well put a hold to it while trying to figure out all those imperatives, including the infrastructure required for the safe operation of that technology.
Doctor of Wisdom, at a point, I mean, in history where the world is discussing EVs, I mean, electronic vehicles and other smart alternatives to, fossil to PMS as we know it, for example. And then Nigeria is talking about CNG. First of all, there's the curiosity to know what the popularity or otherwise of CNG is across the world, and that's number one. Number two is to ask whether Nigeria is just simply lagging or we are dealing with some sort of shared necessity situation right now by turning to CNG as an alternative to petrol.
All right, I think I like very clever question you've asked there, and I'm going to answer the question. So CNG hasn't done quite well compared to the rest. So I'll tell you, in the US, for example, if you have about 1,200 CNG outlets for refueling stations, compared to the charging ports, you have more than 100,000 of electricity EV charging ports for electric vehicles. So it shows overwhelmingly that the trend is skewed towards the electric vehicle. And you're right. But you see, when we talk about energy transition, you hear the concept of just transition. The just transition is talking about, okay, how can we leverage what we have to get what we want? Yes, the wider world has moved away from anything fossil fuel as a transition fuel, and they're now talking about EVs. And even when they're talking fossil fuels, they're talking about things like the gray and the blue hydrogen technology. But Nigeria has decided to say, okay, we're going to build our plants around the CNG. But a number of things we need to think about. Yes, we try to say, yes, we're doing a just transition. We're using what we have to get what we want. But then there's going to be the issue of how acceptable is it? Because you have to understand that the quadrilemma of energy is availability, accessibility, affordability, and acceptability. And the acceptability component affects how you get funding. You're more likely to get funding for renewable energy project from one of the global funders and even some of these charity donation organizations than you are to get for CNG. I do agree. It's a challenge that we're facing. So it's an uphill battle. And this is why you hear some of the narratives that the petroleum sector stakeholders are talking about, like the African Energy Bank to help fund African energy projects. Because you couldn't just get funds for those projects, especially where we're still struggling with the domestic utilization of gas. Remember, most of our gas terminals, anyways, they actually built for exports. The gas pipelines that are supposed to crisscross things like the AKK are still not completed and operational. So we still don't have enough gas that we are, kind of consuming internally. So it's still a concern. The concern is how fast is the world moving away from the CNG technology? Are we playing catch up? Will we even have the support needed to reel out our own, stations? Then the second thing is, what are the lessons learned? Why did the world unanimously move away from the CNG technology? I mean, in the US, we're having about 1,200 stations versus 100,000 of stations in for EVs. Why did they do that shift? Is there a lessons learned for them to learn? Now, the other thing is, how is India successful? Because India is quite successful. If you go to India, even if you take what we call the scooter, what we call keke here in Nigeria, you'll probably see that it will write there, I am CNG powered. Most of their vehicles, once you have a CNG, it must write, I'm CNG powered. Now, India did that through a number of things. They did that through command and control. So at the point, the Indian Supreme Court laid out a court order saying that minimum amount of vehicles from the government, from private people, should be converted to CNG. There were some tax credits that were given to assist that. India leveraged more on the subnationals to drive the process. So it wasn't just a presidential initiative for CNG that drove the entire process from top to bottom. It was getting the governors at the various districts available, kind of into the whole idea, and then they pushed it up from there. So apart from tax credit, they also got their manufacturers to give them a quota and give them some tax support benefits. Now, the third thing that I think we can do better is to get a kind of domestic energy fund. And what do I mean by that? Ghana is doing that. If you earn a certain level of salary and you want to opt for the alternative technology, remember those alternative technologies have a very high end into implementation costs at the beginning. Now, what we can do is to have one of our banks or some of our banks fund it and say, you can actually approach the bank for a single digit credit. They will give you a loan repayable in 4 years, and then they will fund that project for you. What I mean, if you want to convert your vehicle, we are hearing the conversion cost now is about $1 million, and you want to convert it, you want to do it properly. The bank will say, okay, who is going to do it for you? It must be one of the recognized converters that will give you the right kits, especially the ones that are not adulterated kits. And then you go there, you fill your form, get it approved, they implement this in your car, and they set up a system to debit as little as 30,000 to 40,000 per month from your account. That is what Ghana is doing. They're doing something that is from the government through the banks to consumers. Because I think the biggest lessons I've learned in CNG is for you to sustain it, you need to move away from the command kind of approach where you tell people exactly this is the emissions limit you need to meet, let them go adopt the right technology or for alternative fuels to meet it, or you tell companies this is what you need to do to sustain it and grow the market. You need to now go down to the consumers, and funding is a problem, and that's something we must solve. So all of this, I'm talking about amalgamating, integrating, and bringing together all the lessons learned from other people that have done it successfully, and also people that had concerns and abandoned the technology.
All right. I mean, you've made quite salient points there, Dr. Wisdom. But then we hear from people who often are referred to as critical stakeholders in this regard, say that there are a couple of components that must be fundamentally addressed. Otherwise, we won't get it right even in 2 lifetimes. For instance, let's say we need to be very clear as to standards, protocols, what have you. I mean, from a technical standpoint, that much you have also alluded to from a professional perspective. But then let's talk about model. You've mentioned Ghana. You've also cited India in your narrative just a while ago. Would you say, for instance, given the peculiarity of the circumstances we're dealing with regarding this conversation we're having this morning, that the CNG initiative in Nigeria got off on the right footing?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I would like to put it. So I think about it, jump or push. I think we were pushed. We did not jump well on our own, because jumping on our own would mean would have done some real sort of groundwork towards that takeoff.
Right.
Again, I want to separate two fundamental things that I think we need to be aware of. There is a need for gas and there is a market for gas. And people sort of confuse both. Right now, there's a need for gas. Why is there the need for gas? Because domestic energy prices, led by PMS, for which we're more than 60% reliant on, has gone up. And so people are looking for alternatives. But how do we convert that need to a structured market? That is where we need market activities, we need standardization, we need funding support. But when those imperatives are not there, I think we are misinterpreting the need to mean a market. And one thing investors have learned, even in other clients, is that if you cannot convert the need to a market with all the imperatives I've talked about, funding, standardization, legal backing, the government's body language, to say we're going to lead the talk. We're not just going to talk the talk. We're going to walk the talk with the people at the front. Then investors cannot come in. So this is the biggest problem that we're having. It's coming a bit too late, and we are not showing that we even have the second movers advantage that we ought to be having when we're having this sort of conversation, because we're playing catch up.
Two words I want to leverage on real quick, Dr. Wisdom, from this point you just established. First is, you said market, because you said there's market for gas, there is need for gas, and then you also used the term investors. Now, speaking of which, just yesterday we were told that the government has attracted no less than $200 million by way of investments in CNG specific initiatives. Are we supposed to be excited or yearn for more?
No, I think the devil is in the detail, and I'm going to break it down. First and foremost, when you hear 200 million, this is what investors do. They pledge 200 million, but they actually do not dole out 200 million in one go. There are contractual clauses that say we're going to phase this 200 million. We'll probably give you the first 60 million, and then when you meet certain criteria, we'll give you the rest of them contingent on you meeting this criteria. We have seen that time and time again. And that's why when you see a project that was well intended and funded, now the investors pull out their funds and say they're no more interested, right? So that's not something to get us excited, because essentially they are breakout contractual clauses that says if you cannot meet our requirement, or if we cannot see potential later on into the market, we will pull out. So it's still something for us to feel that this is the beginning. Again, when you look at that level of funding versus the billions of dollars that are going into other sectors of the economy, in other clients, and even within the CNG client in other economies, you need to know that and versus their population, you now realize that we haven't even started. I mean, there's still a lot to do. So it's not time for anyone to get comfortable. And obviously, it would allude to a misrepresentation of the fact if you feel that the 200 million is already there in the account. No, it's not. It's usually phased, and definitely that's just too small. I mean, what can that do compared to the expense of pipelines that we do need to be able to run our CNG initiative? I'll give you just context, right? India really doesn't have oil, but they have 73,000 kilometers of gas pipelines. We have oil and gas, but we only have about 6,000 to 7,000 kilometers of gas pipeline. So you can understand that, but we're actually with the eighth largest reserve in the world. India doesn't even have, they're not in the first 100, if you want to look at it that way. So there's something about driving a national gas initiative and the state of your facility. India has driven that way, even without having any gas, and they have driven all of that because they understand that to consume energy properly, you need the infrastructure, you need the funding, you need the government support, and you need standardization, and you need to educate people. There is no way people are going to buy a technology if they are not well aware. So where is the awareness campaign to tell people this case has happened in Indonesia, this fear had happened in those states, this is what the mitigations are to ensure that it doesn't occur as we begin to ramp up our adoption of CNG as a technology.
Now, still staying with the element of investment, just recently, about a week ago, we're told that Dangote had invested or would invest, at least indicated interest to invest, something in the neighborhood of 200 million US dollars. For some people who are looking from the sidelines, they probably are of the sentiments that for a man who has done something around $20 billion in a refinery, the first of its kind on the soil of Africa, it's probably a signal that there's much more to come, that there is hope, potential, to use the word, with regards to CNG initiative. Can we then deduce from that that this is some sort of charity beginning from home?
I mean, there's a lot of hope when it comes to, one of our own. By that I mean a Nigerian believing in the investment opportunity. But then, I think the government needs to do a lot to make it attractive, because we've also seen the Dangote say, well, I wanted to invest in steel, but I'm not going to invest anymore. There's a lot of factors that are fighting that. So, yes, as I said, there is a need, but the Dangote is trying to bring funding to put the imperatives in place to establish a sustainable market. There's a need. There's clearly a need. But how sustainable is that market eventually would depend on how it's designed. So yes, it's something to have a very good optimism about. But versus our energy needs is quite small, and we can only harp on the need for scalability, even as we begin to ramp up. As I said, a lot of factors are against us. Even when you're talking about CNG technology, you're talking about the fact that we need to domesticate research and innovation, because the way energy is utilized in the UK is different from the US and is different from Nigeria. And so you still need domestication of that innovation. And we don't have that. We don't even have a framework that is legally enshrined to drive CNG. We're just having policy direction. So those are things that we need to sit down and say, okay, people are showing interest. We obviously have a need, but how do we establish a sustainable market? How do we ensure, go and read the records. A lot of initiatives that has lasted in different countries, including the NLNG projects that that contributes a lot to our economy today, has been enshrined into some of our legal frameworks. That's the way to do it. So if you're thinking you're doing CNG, you need to come up first with the command and control and enshrine it. If not, another government will come in and not be able to be willing to continue the initiative. So these are the things we need to learn our lessons, and I think we need to do a lessons learned workshop. We had the Nigerian Gas Master Plan in 2008. What made it failed? Why are we not harping on the lessons learned? So this is not just learning from Ghana or India or the UK or the US. We've had our own kickstart. It went right down, and at that point we started all over again, and now came up with the Nigerian gas policy. And then of 2017, and we've now come up with the decade of year of gas initiative in 2020, and now the decade of gas initiative that should terminate in 2030. What are the lessons learned? What can we cross-pollinate? What are the ideas we can bring from the Nigerian Gas Master Plan, which was very well thought of at the time? But then, so we have a difference between policy intent, policy implementation, and policy outcomes. All the programs were well thought of, but how were they implemented? Very horribly. And what was the outcome? Very, very terrible outcomes.
Two more issues to be addressed quickly, Dr. Wisdom, before we let you off this morning. Let's talk about the issue of gas for a minute, because you have again and again made a passing reference to it. Nigeria, we are told, is substantially blessed with gas. In fact, for the first time, we're having a minister for petroleum resources with a focus specifically on gas. But what we're doing with gas at this point, I mean, 25 years into the return to democracy, is a different kettle of fish altogether. How do we scale gas? I mean, whatever blessing, so to speak, that comes with it. Because we know when we had former Lagos State Governor Raji Babatunde Fashola as Minister for Power in this country, time and again, there were complaints about how that we didn't have enough gas. That's been the reason we're having epileptic power supply across the country. How do we scale our outputs in specific ways around the gas potential that we have?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the regional hub system for gas is going to be one potential solution that I think we can deploy. And, all of those thoughts are there because we've had this conversation about gas industrial parks, and those conversations have always been there. It's just the willpower to implement. But I think something may be coming up to be a game changer if we can grab the opportunity. Again, the funding continues to frustrate us. First and foremost is the Nigerian government came up with what we call the Nigerian Gas Commercialization Program, flare gas commercialization program. And that program was to take out flare gas. And the flare gas ranges from dry gas to very wet gas. That means you could have dry gas that is very much ready for CNG with little or no changes or processing. And you could also have wet gas where you could strip and also create LPG and the rest of the other components that you need, and the more heavier and liquid components. Now, that means there's a lot of monetization options around the various streams of gas composition. Now, what that means is that the government said, come up with your technology and tell us what you want to do. So you know the flare gas volume, you know the quality of gas, you have your technology, tell us the project you're going to do, how does it benefit the Nigerian government? And the whole idea was to make sure that they can solve the problem of stranded gas. So at the various centers in the Niger Delta, there are gas deposits around a couple of places. And those gas deposits may not be commercially viable enough for maybe the mother company that is actually producing the gas. So they may choose to flare it. But a smaller company could come and uptake that gas and do a little project with it. And sometimes it is that way because we don't have enough pipelines to commingle those gas into commercial quantities. So the government said, let's bring people to solve that problem. Why am I bringing that to bear? Is this: if we can have people successfully implement projects across those various flare sites, it means that we'll have gas pipeline quality gas at those various centers for implementation of projects. So you could have things like one flare site could say we want to use gas for power, we want to do a gas for power initiative, and that means whichever gas is available there can create a regional power. Because ultimately, even when we're talking about the regional collapsing grid, the central grid, it is creating regional grids. That's the answer. Because once you have a single point of failure and there's an attack on that single point of failure, it comes down ultimately. So if we can develop our regional gas hubs, leveraging on the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program, then we could have gas for power. Thankfully, we have increased our tariffs, so they're now cost reflective for Band A, for example. So yes, we could have gas for power, and then we could then look at putting the critical infrastructure pipeline all the way perhaps to the north, where there's no gas, and supplying them. But I think the south-south, for starters, can develop their regional hubs and create electricity for themselves. At least that would take us off the central, as many people as you can take off the central grid. That's better, and that is further engendered by the fact that the federal government has approved the, we now have the Electricity Act of 2023, which means that states can develop their own electricity. So I think it's all coming together to promote the use of regional electricity generation rather than the central grid.
Okay, let's tie things up real quick, Doc. We'll begin again from where we started from. Just recently, the president said to Nigerians, look, you have two options in front of you now. You either buy PMS for whatever amount it sells out there, or you turn to the alternative, which is CNG, which many people say it's 4-5 times cheaper than PMS. That seems to make economic sense on some level. Now, how does that resonate with you? That's the first question. The second question is, now that there's going to be some competitiveness, in a manner of speaking, between the prices of PMS and that of CNG, what are the odds that industry mischief makers and share saboteurs will not frustrate the efforts to, as it were, gain mileage with CNG in such a way that advantage is given to those who are in the core petrol business?
Yeah, I mean the politics, energy politics is much anticipated. I mean it happens even in the U.S., a developed economy like the U.S. So we do expect that to happen, but we can only hope that because necessity is driving the need, this adoption, that we would leave sentiments behind and know that the choice before us is either we continue to go for PMS as overarchingly, and that would cost us in our economy and our pockets compared to the CNG. Now, let me even just put out one situation here for everyone to understand. We talk about the crude for naira deal that is midwifing the PMS that we have today. It's not entirely free. There is an opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is the fact that already we have a lot of our crude volumes encumbered on crude back loans, and that means that we do not have as much as we would love to even sell to the international buyers and get money for our FX needs. Not only that, we are also cutting part of that, a significant part of that, and if not almost all, and giving it away in naira. So whilst we have energy sufficiency in country, we risk having a challenge where we do not have enough FX to be able to moderate from the oil and gas sector to be able to moderate our FX market. And that's why you're having a situation where our currency is sliding all the way, even though we have stopped the subsidy, but it's sliding because the opportunity cost has set in that we are not earning FX, rather we are actually earning naira, and we are not, having enough to increase our buffer, our FX buffer. That's the first thing we need to understand. So the consumption ties down to the opportunity cost, and that opportunity cost is hurting our economy. Now, when it comes to the issue of, the president saying that people should adopt CNG, I think that is an aspiration. And that aspiration should be further backed by several, stewardship of objectives. Yes, you could get to CNG. These are the areas. This is how much we have succeeded in proliferating the adoption of CNG. This is where the centers are, because as basic as, okay, where can I get it even converted, even if I have the money? People do not know. But people can go and buy, a rechargeable, maybe they call it generator, but you plug it and then an inverter. That's, people call it a rechargeable generator in the local areas, but it's basically an inverter. They plug it, it charges, and then they can use it for your house. People know where to buy it in a shop. But the CNG is not something you just walk into a store and say, yes, I want this kit, I want this. So the government needs to know that the level of adoption will have a direct correlation with the availability of the equipment and the imperatives that will aid this adoption. So it's not just telling people to go and adopt it. It's also matching that with numbers to say, this is the statistics that we're rolling out. Please key in, and that will drop your fuel price. Otherwise, we risk substandard products that will midwife accidents and be counterproductive to the whole intent of the CNG adoption.
Dr. Wisdom Patrick Anang, energy experts, words fail us to say thank you to you this morning for these very valuable insights you've shared with us.
Thank you very much, and do enjoy your morning.
You too. That's why we'll take a break on our first discussion, everyone. When we return, we turn our attention to issues of life and death. Well, that's in a sense. It means we'll be talking about security-related issues and what must be done by way of military leadership going forward.